this model of Facebook, and it's not just Facebook, it's TikTok, it's all of the things that do this kind of attention harvesting, which ends up, it doesn't intend to polarize.
Right, it's the
byproduct.
Right.
It's a second order effect.
But in the way that like the unintended consequence of cigarettes was, it had an externality, which was lung cancer, and oil companies had oil spills, and so then government had to regulate it. These companies are fundamentally different because their externality is a polarized population, which in a democracy decreases the capacity of government directly. So the big oil companies and big pharma companies and whatever can do lobbying and campaign budget support and whatever they can to affect government, but their mode of operation is not directly decreasing the effectiveness of government. The mode of Facebook's operation directly polarizes the population, which polarizes the representative class, which creates more gridlock, which decreases the capacity of government, both relative to other nations that don't have that issue and relative to their own internal tech issues, right, and their own internal domestic issues.
So it can't even regulate Facebook. In the example I gave at the beginning of the senator who was going to meet with Francis, but then couldn't because these stories that polarized them went viral.
She should have shamed that senator. That's what she should have done. And that would have gone viral, and then he would have backed down. Because then his constituents would have been mad at him and go, hey, man. What's interesting is that Instagram doesn't have a share feature.
Yeah.
I just realized that. Which is
the
really
share
kind of
feature isn't actually the key. TikTok is not really emphasizing shares.
But Facebook is.
Facebook is, but the key is
Twitter
virality, right? So
Virality.
share is one way to get virality.
Yeah.
TikTok is just looking at engagement and upregulating the things that get most engagement. This is actually a key point because let's say that we tried to make a piece of legislation based on thinking it was about shares. Then Facebook would just move to the TikTok algorithm.
Just by
right?
what you look at the most, that thing gets reshared to other people.
And
Make it
this
viral
is-
based on unconscious signals as opposed to explicit click signals.
So there's a deeper point here, which is not, is there a piece of regulation that we can put in, even if we trust the government to do that? It's, let's even say we had a very trustworthy government. It's, can the government regulate at the speed that tech can outmaneuver it?
Well, and here's the other question. If you didn't have any algorithms whatsoever, wouldn't you be now open to being manipulated by troll farms just simply by volume? You know, if they have 100,000 accounts at each individual location, they have 100,000 locations, and they're just pumping out different Instagram pages and TikTok pages, and we don't really even know how many they actually have because they discover them. Like
Facebook shuts down 2 billion fake accounts per quarter.
Holy.
I'm sure they get.
And this is before AI.
Yeah,
That's
before the
before-
GPT.
and you're obviously being sarcastic by saying they get all of them. They don't.
No, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just to let people know they weren't
Okay, so-
totally paying attention. That's insane. 2 billion per quarter fake accounts.
Yep.
And is there a centralized area where these are coming from? Is it all
I don't
Russian
know.
troll farms? Are they some
Well,
of them political ones that are used against opponents? Like,
Well, one of the problems is that we don't know because actually that's not true. Facebook has been. I really want to celebrate all the positive moves they make. By the way, this is not just so I'm clear and we're clear. Like this is about finding what's an earnest solution to these problems.
Right.
And all the times they make great decisions that are moving in the positive direction. We need to celebrate that. They do these quarterly reports, I think, called like information quality reports, or they publish every quarter how many accounts they take down. But it's just like a PDF, like they're just putting out a post as opposed to letting external researchers know, for example, in each country, what are the top 10 stories that go viral?
There are people who are proposing that social media and the internet as a whole needs rigorous identity layer.
I would say that's a requisite need for where we're going. Like
I was thinking that about Twitter a long time ago.
Yeah.
And we kind of have that with Facebook, but it's not rigorous, obviously.
Right.
But Twitter, you know, you can have jackmeoff69, and that's your Twitter handle, and with some weird Gmail account, and then just post nonsense, you know?
And so there's no ability for justice in that system.
Right.
There's also no and accountability. There's also no ability for the user reading somebody else's thing to know who they are, right? For the veterans group or the whichever group to know, is this a Russian troll farm that is pretending to be a Christian or whatever?
Right.
And especially, is this even a human or is this an AI in the very near future? So the ability to be able to know this is a human and this is actually the human that they say they are is not an adequate solution, but it's an example of a solution. Now this, of course, then creates other issues. One of the things we've liked about the internet is anonymity, because if there's rigorous identity, who has access to that information? And am I now
do we make it safe?
centralizing
Right.
data?
Right.
So how do you... And
How do you
this,
become a whistleblower, right? Which is huge. Or how does something like Arab Spring happen? Right.
How
Without
can you be
anonymity.
safely
Yeah.
anonymous? There's a whole decentralized community. There's a great movement called Radical Exchange run by Glenn Weil, and they're trying to create part of this third attractor, this like what's the center of the bowling alley that's a digital version of democracy. What are decentralized ways of proof of personhood? There's a project called Idena. There's a bunch of things people can look up. Radical Exchange's work. It's part of a whole movement of which Taiwan is included, which is that, I don't know if we really got to the Taiwan example, but
We didn't, I don't think.
Okay.
We showed John Cena instead.
oh, that's right. Well, people need to get it because it's an example of what is working. It's a solution. It's a direction of how we can go, which is you can only fit so many people into a town hall to deliberate, right? So there's sort of a limit to our idea of democracy is kind of guided by ideas from 200 years ago. They've created a system called polis, which is a way of gathering opinions about various ideas and then sort of seeking who wants more funding for various things, less funding for various things. And whenever there's an unlikely agreement, so they sample a bunch of people, say you sit over here, you sit over here. They get these clusters, like these people kind of like this, these people kind of like these other things. Whenever there's an unlikely agreement between those clusters, in other words, consensus, rough consensus, that's what they sort of boost to the top of that system. So everyone's seeing areas of common ground, common ground, as opposed to fault line of society, be more angry, join the common thread, etc.
Right.
And then you're invited into a civic design process where you actually say, hey, I don't like the tax system. And they're like, great, we're going to invite 30 of the people who were part of that rough consensus. We're like, let's improve the tax system. Let's talk about how we're going to do it. And they do a combination of in-person stuff, this is a little bit before COVID, and Zoom calls, and then do like these mechanisms to kind of get an idea of where do people agree and then how would we make it better. They've done this with air pollution. They have a huge air pollution problem because of the lithography that they do with chips and things like this. They do it with budgeting. They also have a transparent budget for the entire Taiwan government so people can see. Like imagine if the US federal budget, I don't know if you want to do this, but lived on a blockchain where you had transparency into all the, what was getting funding, and that would create more trust in government because you could see essentially who's getting the big contracts and for how much, and that was more accessible. And there was a civic participatory process where more people could contribute and participate in identifying areas of inefficiency. You could even imagine a place where citizens could get rewarded by saying, hey, this is inefficient, we could do it better this way. And if you identify places where it could get more efficient, you could get money or resources by making the whole system work better for everyone.
If you ran a current audit of the U.S. government through blockchain, you'd have a damn revolt. They would go, holy, this whole thing is corrupt. This is infested down to the roots.
Yeah.
And that would be a real problem. And I think the Nancy Pelosi's of the world would really have a hard time with that.
I heard some clip that you did where you were talking about your pot thoughts of people being in big buildings and the pipes everywhere, and just like how weird some aspects of civilization are. So think about how weird democracy is. Like as an idea, the idea that you can have some huge number of people who don't know each other, who all believe different stuff and want different stuff, figure out how to actually agree and work together. As opposed to just tribalize against each other and do their own thing. Like, it's actually a wild idea to think that would be possible at any scale. Maybe a tiny scale where they can all talk.
That's when it started. It was a tiny scale.
Right, and we've always had a scale issue, right? In 1776, you could all go into the town hall and fit. And so I wasn't just hearing a proposition that a special interest group had created and I get a vote yes or no, which will inherently polarize the population, right? Very few propositions get 99% of the vote. They get 51% of the vote because they benefit something and they harm some other things. And the people who care about what gets harmed are fighting against it. That polarizes the population against each other. Social media then just drives that like crazy.
Just like Facebook saying, hey, this is a conversation about censorship or free speech. And boom, you just split the population in half. As opposed to, hey, we all agree we could do a little bit less virality. We could stop the teenager use in these ways and we'd be better for everyone.
The proposition creation isn't designed to polarize the population. It just does, because as soon as you get beyond the scale of we can all actually inform what a good proposition would be by being in the town hall and having
like
a conversation. Yeah.
Just define a proposition. I mean, not everybody knows what a proposition is.
Something you would vote on. What's a good way to go forward? Before we make a choice on what a good way to go forward is, we have to do some sense making of what is even going on here. Like, what are the values? What's going on here? So the point was a conversation. That happened at a smaller scale. Also, if you had a representative, the level of tech at the time was something that a very well-educated person could understand most of, right? They could understand a lot of the tech landscape. We're in a situation now where the scale issue of democracy has been completely broken, so almost nobody, we're supposed to have a government formed by the people, but nobody really understands the energy grid issues or first strike nuclear policy or monetary policy or anything like that. and everyone's voice can't be heard, right? Now, what Taiwan was working on is the tech that is particularly in the West breaking democracy, could that same tech be employed differently to actually make 21st century democracy more real? So the same AI that can mess up the information landscape for everyone, could we use that type of AI that understands language to be able to see what does everyone think and feel, and actually be able to parse that into something we can understand? So there's an online environment that says, here's the distribution of people's values. Here's the various values people care about. Here's the emotions they have. Here are the kind of facts about it. And then is there a place where we can actually craft propositions together? So there's a way to make it, to be able to utilize these same tools to make democracy more realized, to make collective intelligence more realized. But right now, as we were saying, autocracies are working on employing these tools. Corporations are working on it, both of which are top-down. Democracies really aren't. They're outside of Taiwan and Estonia and a few small examples.